This is a famous UFO case I had not heard of, Illinois Triangle UFO sighting by multiple police officers. So this sighting was of a huge unidentified triangular shaped UFO, and it seems like all of the 5 observables. Amazing stuff. It was seen by several police officers, we'll go through the testimonies in a minute, and others in the early morning hours of January 5th, 2000 over the state of Illinois near Scott Air Force Base. The officers from a number of small Illinois towns were able to track the unknown object and maintain radio contact with each other during the event. They have the audio. It's amazing. Chris Lehto, welcome to LehtoFiles. The first person to notice anything unusual that early morning, 4 a.m., was Melvin Knoll. Knoll is the owner of a miniature golf course located in Highland, Illinois. It's approximately 24 miles from St. Louis. During the off-season, he's a truck driver, making deliveries at all hours of the night. Knoll was returning from a delivery run he just completed at approximately 4 a.m. on Wednesday, January 5th. He parked his truck in the back of the building and began to exit the vehicle. While doing so, he noticed a bright star over in the northeast sky. He didn't give it much thought at the time and proceeded to enter the building. After checking things inside, he was returning to his truck when he again noticed the bright star in the northeast sky. This time he stopped and observed it more closely. He noticed the light was in fact moving in his general direction. In just a few minutes, Knoll noticed the bright white light was part of a larger object. It appeared to be rectangular in shape and was comparable to the size of a football field. Listen to this, it's amazing.
I got in here about 4 o'clock in the morning, and as I got out of my pickup truck, I happened to look over in the northeast, and I seen that bright star, which I thought it was a star, shining down this way. So I goes in the inside, was in there for a few minutes, and came back out to get in my truck, and I looked over there again. And I thought to myself, oh, that's awful bright and awful low. And I just kept watching it, and it's moving. So I kept my eyes on it, and I just, as it came into the city of Highland here, over these trees right here, I could see under it. It was like a custard red lights, and it was like a 2-story house with a little penthouse on top, and had, I don't know, 6 or 8 windows in it, and there was just a bright light on the inside, but all the same. And as it was traveling so slow, right over the treetops, it just kept it moving. And I was just standing here watching it going out of Highland, and there was windows in the back of it, and I thought to myself, that I could barely see it. Well, there would be nobody would believe me what I seen if I don't tell somebody. So I figured, well, I'll go down to the police station and to see if they could see anything.
Okay, so first, that's just unbelievable. The fact that he could see clear details on it. 2 stories of windows, and he saw the red light underneath moving slowly. So something like that, how can it move slowly if it's a blimp without any noise? It's the only thing it could be, like a giant, large blimp flying slowly. This is back in 2000. So he thinks nobody will believe me. I'm going to go down to the police station and see if any other police out there patrolling can actually go and check it out. See if there is something there. And man, a bunch of them see it. Watch this.
Could you check the area?
I asked CENTCOM if they were joking, because again, I joke around with some of the dispatchers there, and they said negative.
It's a joke, right?
No, this is not a joke. I just got off the phone with Nancy from Highland PD.
It's like, okay, so I asked him if the person reporting was 1055, which means DUI or drunk.
Did they say if the truck driver was DUI or anything?
And they said no.
Yeah, you'll notice a lot of them are joking initially, right? But during these testimonials, they're definitely not joking anymore. He says he wouldn't have shared it initially. He said, I'm not going to tell anybody. And he ends up changing his mind, I guess, probably talking to the other police officers, right? If other police officers are seeing it, then you don't think you're crazy.
He said he was serious.
10-4 now.
Now, during this whole time, while driving out here, I'm kind of going back and forth with St. Clair County, asking, well, what am I supposed to do if I find it, that kind of thing. And
just a quick question. If I happen to find it, what am I supposed to do with it?
They asked me if I wanted the number for the UFO hotline. I said negative. Even if I saw it, I'm not going to report it.
If I see it, I'm not saying a word.
It's interesting that they had the number for the UFO hotline. Do police dispatches of today have this number, or did she go and track it down? This is in 2000, remember? Basically, the internet had just come out, so were they knowledgeable on UFOs? More knowledgeable back then?
Last thing that went over Lebanon, this was approximately 5 minutes ago, was a military cargo plane. It looked like a C-5. Affirmative, it's the air recognition lights. It's got green, red, and also white.
That's a good point, because Scott Air Force Base is nearby. C-5s flying into there. These police officers must be used to seeing these aircraft, flying in and out of Scott Air Force Base. So they had to have seen many in the past.
When I first saw, again, the double lights, that would have been a little to the left of the one street light and the red flashing light, which is a radio tower out in Summerfield, about 2 fingers to the left of the flashing red radio tower. They were almost touching, and they were so bright. It at first almost looked like car headlights on brights, but they were bigger and brighter than the like street lights that the farmers have around their houses and so forth. Well, I called CENTCOM to let them know what it was I saw, and then I was going to investigate.
Be advised, there's a very bright white light east of town. Looks like it doesn't look like an aircraft, though.
And I didn't really speed up that time because I wasn't sure exactly what it was I was seeing. It was at that point when I turned on my overhead emergency lights, because again, in my rig-wag flashes, because I wasn't sure whether it was a plane going down or not. When I next saw it, it had turned from 2 into 1. Again, gigantic bright light. And during all this, including when it was the 2, there was white light radiating off of it, almost like the Japanese rising sun battle flag. Okay, we're now coming up. I'm getting ready to turn on the east route 50. When I got to the bridge at the very east end of town, it had turned into like an elongated cigar. Again, very intense bright light with the white light radiating off of it. I still had my overheads on, continuing towards Summerfield, which is eastbound, and it was still at about the 2 o'clock position from where I was at. It was right here when I noticed that it looked like it was coming towards me, because the light appeared to be getting bigger. That's why I thought it was definitely moving. It was kind of moving from my right to the left. When I saw it was definitely moving towards me, I pulled over the side of the road. Right where I pulled over, there's a sign that says, "Test pavement next 21 miles," a big green sign. I turned off the overhead lights, the headlights, turned off the car, and got out of the car on the driver's side. I was standing over here when it got closer. That's when I was able to discern the actual shape, the triangle, and so forth. When it got about approximately 150, 200 foot south of my location and about 1,000, 1,500 foot high off the ground is when it made the flat turn, started heading southwest again very, very slowly, almost like a floating or a moving hovering.
So that's just amazing, right? He says 150, 200 feet away. 200 feet! I mean, look at that guy. That mustache is amazing, right? From 2000. All these police officers, remember, they're on duty, so they're not drinking. And I think they're only sharing this information because there's so many of them actually in radio contact. Kind of reminds me of the Belgian UFO wave, where you had all the actual police officers seeing these triangles, almost very similar to Belgian UFO.
I reached back in the car, picked up my radio to tell CENTCOM where it was at and so forth. And when I looked up again, which was spaced about 2 to 3 seconds, it was already over Shiloh, which is about 6 to 7 miles to the southwest.
That's unbelievable, right? So he reaches in his car to make a radio call. He looks up, and the object, which was going super slow and turning super slow, which again is impossible. I mean, you'd have to have a blimp, would have to do that with some sort of fans or something to actually turn and make that maneuver. So they say it's 100 yards across. This triangle is. That's what we get from later testimonial. And then it goes 6 miles in 2 to 4 seconds, he says. So if you take 3 seconds, something goes 6 miles in 3 seconds, That's 7,200 miles per hour. So that is Mach 10. This thing basically goes Mach 10. And he didn't say anything about a noise. So with no noise, going Mach 10 is just amazing. That's unbelievable. Instantaneous acceleration with no visible signs of thrust. Basically anti-gravity craft. Awesome sighting.
10-4 overall, whether it's a plane or not, it's heading westbound now. It should be really...
That's amazing, right? So they're in radio contact, and he says if the Shiloh officer looks up, he can probably see something now. And he says right there, I see something, but I don't know what that is.
On January 5th, about 4:30 in the morning, Ledman gets a call for this flying object, and after he had seen it and said that it might be in Shiloh or Lebanon, I'm driving right here, eastbound on Lebanon Avenue, and right in this field is where I observed it.
Incom 5404.
I had looked up in the sky and observed this huge arrow-shaped, triangular-shaped object just floating in the sky right in the open field right over here, and it had 3 big bright lights lighting up the entire sky just beneath the flying object, and it was just floating gradually west-southerly along this field over here at a gradual slow speed. And then as I stopped right up the road here to get out and see if I could get a picture or observe it better, the object, with unexplainably in the naked eye, was just from gradually moving to all the way down in the field, like within the snap of a finger.
Again, you have instantaneous acceleration. So he says unexplainably, and he sees it very clearly, right? He can tell the shape of it, even with these bright lights on the back of it. So he's not being blinded by the bright lights. He can tell it's this arrow-shaped object. And then inexplicably, as he says there, doesn't make sense, it can just zoom with no sound. Amazing stuff.
Or a wink of the eye. And there was no sound. I had my window down. The radio was off. And there was no sounds, nothing coming from the flying object. And it was every bit of 75 to 100 yards that appeared to be wide. I didn't get a very good look at the length-wise. Next thing you know, it just was down the road.
Incom 6004.
Go ahead.
I've got that object inside also.
Are you serious?
It's huge.
10-4.
And that's when I first saw it. It was a huge object. It was an arrowhead-shaped object. It's concaved in the rear, and it was huge. For the size of the object, it was moving very slowly. Only about 500 to 1,000 feet off the ground. It was very low, so I got a real good look at it. There were 3 lights to the rear of the object, one in the center and one on either side, on the right and left side. And then in the center of the rear, in the concave section, it was like a strobing white light that got bright and then dimmed off as the strobing effect went across. Then on the bottom center of the object, I observed it was a red blinking light.
I mean, look at his mustache. You know, is a man with that mustache gonna lie? He gets so close to this object, right? He can tell he can tell there's the second story that the original witness said, and then there's some sort of light moving back and forth, right, in intensity. He also says it's concave, so he gets close enough and sees it with enough detail that he can tell that the back end of it is actually concave, right? It's not convex, so he can tell it's not a perfect triangle. There's concavity in the back and that moving intensity of light. And so there hasn't been any photos yet. I know there's clicking in the video, but he actually gets a photo with a Polaroid. Let's see it.
It headed straight to the north, and then as it banked, it made a distinct tilt, and then it turned and went toward the St. Louis Dupont direction, which would be to the northwest.
So you saw a distinct bank?
Yes, it didn't sway in the wind or anything like a blimp possibly would.
That's different from the other police officer, right? He said it did a flat turn just in place and spun, and now this, it banked. So different ways that it's moving through the air. Like he says there, it didn't appear like a blimp, didn't sway in the wind like a blimp would.
So I hopped out of my patrol car, went to the rear of the trunk, grabbed the Polaroid, and snapped a quick picture of it as it headed to the north.
What does it look like to you?
It's kind of V-shaped. Looks like it's possibly headed toward Lambert.
Snapped the picture, it was cold out, and Polaroid camera didn't work real well, and with the coldness and being just a Polaroid camera, and not real good night, but...
CENTCOM 6004.
Go ahead, 6004.
Does Dupo have a Polaroid?
That I don't know.
From the time they told me that Millstadt had seen it, I drove probably about 5 miles down the highway and pulled off the side of the road to look, and another officer from a neighboring town came up, and I told him what I was doing. We both laughed about it and made a few jokes, and he left, and I got back in my car and went maybe a quarter mile, and I seen something in the sky. And then, before I'd seen a couple little planes, because Parks Airport's about 5 miles from here. They were coming in, but then after I seen this other object, it didn't appear to be like any plane I'd seen before.
6004, 3923 on County 2. 6004, Dan. I'm not sure if this thing item that you said, it's one here appears to be pretty high in the area. When I first seen it, with binoculars, you can see the different colors. Now it just appears to be white. Very large. It's hard to tell. It's pretty far off in the distance.
I looked at it with binoculars. It looked a lot brighter. The lights were a lot more, had a lot more brightness to them than a regular aircraft would. And about that time, the dispatcher called me back again. I didn't know if I still seen the object. And I said yes. And she said that Lambert Airport's on the phone. They said there's nothing in the area around you.
This object was above me about 500 feet, and it was huge. Now it's as usually the planes are. It's not low at all.
500 feet is really close, for aircraft. When we're fighting F-16 pilots or any fighter pilots in the U.S., 500 feet's the closest you can get if you're an experienced pilot, right? For newer pilots, they can only go to 1,000 feet. So 500 feet's the absolute closest that we can even get to each other when we're fighting. If you get closer than that, it's a safety violation, a knock it off. So the fact he's looking up 500 feet in an air environment, he is extremely close. Again, as close as you can get if you're actually fighting another aircraft.
The object was above me about 500 feet, and it was huge.
I couldn't tell exactly how far it was. It's a pretty dark night, and I was looking with binoculars, but it was definitely off to the east pretty far.
So by the time it gets to Dupo, it's climbed essentially thousands of feet up into the air, and he's checking it out with binoculars, so it's not very low. It seems like it departed, which is basically for an hour it flew around. And based on the timings, it appears to be just one object, right? You could say maybe it's multiple objects in different parts of the city, like they turn off the lights over here and then they turn on the lights over there, and that's how it's able to warp around. But based off the timings, it looks like it's only one object that flew through.
Far.
The UFO took its course through Highland, Illinois at approximately 4 a.m. It then moved southwest toward the town of Summerfield, where it was spotted by Lebanon police at 4:18. It then approached the police officer at 4:23, where it then shot suddenly to Shiloh 6 miles away in 2 to 4 seconds, and then moved southwest. The UFO then moved to the town of Millstadt, where it was seen at 4:28 a.m. local police time, where it then took a northwesterly direction, and was then spotted by an officer of the Dupo Police Department at 5:03 a.m., where he observed the object turn back to the east.
Okay, so there is more to the story. I recommend you go to the link in the description and check out. Thanks to Daryl Barker for creating this. Amazing stuff. Okay, so one question is, could an object like this fly that close to Scott Air Force Base and not be noticed, right, or cause some sort of issues? And I would say the biggest thing is it's down low. If it's at 500 feet, your radar is going to have a difficult time picking it up. And especially if something's moving slow, right? If something's moving really slow, the radar uses Doppler to actually weed out things like birds, flocks of birds, or weather, because airplanes, nothing really flies slower than 100 knots. Maybe your Cessnas or helicopters. But if it's not a helicopter base, they don't have radar, and helicopters are very difficult to actually see on radar, especially back in 2000. So I think they probably wouldn't have seen it, right? Until it climbed. But once it climbed now, going back, looking at the radar tapes, seems like, yes, they should have some data, some military radar painting this object, see what it is. So I thought that was just unbelievable case. If you look here, this is by Officer Barton in Lebanon Police Department. How clearly he can see this thing, right? And he says the lights are separated like this, whereas the other police officer said looked like in a line towards the rear of the aircraft. Multiple colored lights here. He says 30 to 40 feet wide. So 30 to 40 feet wide, is that this whole object? 65 to 75 feet long. Again, distances are difficult to see. The other officer said it was maybe 100 yards wide, even 100 yard wide. And look at these large white lights, right? Super large white lights, but he could still make out details of the entire object. And this is the actual rear of the object from Officer Stevens in Millstadt. Again, he shows the red light. We have a blinking red light here, right? So blinking red light, white lights on the back, and then dimmer white light strobing. So he said you had something strobing back here on the rear. More lights involved. And this is from Officer Martin in Shiloh. He said he had the actual lights further towards the back, right? But he said he was a little further away. But still very close. I mean, he said unbelievably close. Maybe it's tough to tell from the angles, or were these lights actually changing position on the actual triangle craft? And he doesn't show it concave back here. This is just a reconstruction from, again, that Edge of Reality show. Artistic reconstruction here, and you show the concave in the back, blinking red lights, and then these white lights showing different positions. Witnesses are amazing, all in radio contact and recorded. What do you guys think of this case? One of the best cases? Let me know in the comments. Please hit the like button, it really helps. It's free. Subscribe to get future notifications or release videos like this. And you can support the channel at patreon.com/Chris Lehto or become a YouTube member. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.
I reached back in the car, picked up my radio to tell CENTCOM where it was at and so forth. And when I looked up again, which was space about 2 to 3 seconds, it was already over Shiloh, which is about 6 to 7 miles to the southwest.